going to learn how to do a proper handstand. There's a lot of different drills out there. Here's the one that I use that I found had the most success. You start off with the front support, and you make sure the athlete has a very nice rounded back. Their butt is low and lined up with their ankles. You don't want them sticking their butt out. You want that to be completely straight. And all that's going to happen is you're going to angle the feet upwards over time into a handstand, but try to maintain this body position. You can have the athlete do little drills such as this, where you're moving different body segments in different ways, just to show them that the body has to be isolated, tight as one unit, and when you move the legs, that doesn't change what everything else does. The shoulders still stay aligned, the head is still neutral, and everything else can still move independently without altering all of that. At this point, you can start having the body move a little bit. You want them to lean forward, lean back, side to side, little circles, but just getting the body realizing that doing a handstand actually takes strength. You're not just going to kick up to handstand and try to balance. You have to activate the muscles all around the shoulder joints and the wrist joints to make sure that you remain balanced. In terms of hand position, I usually have my hands like this. They're slightly off to the side, but where the thumbs are pointing forward and the fingers are spread out as much as possible. If my fingers are together, I'm going to have a smaller surface area, which means less control. Ultimately, as my handstand gets better, most of my balance is going to come from my fingertips. So I want to make sure that I actually practice that and understand that I need a really nice solid base for my hands. However, when I first start, a lot more balance is going to come from the elbows and from the shoulders. So make sure the athlete knows that they're going to be using all those muscles at first. But the less elbow bend you can have, the better your handstand is going to look. And what you're going to do now is start building it up. You're not changing the position, you're just making sure that the feet keep going higher and higher and higher. So you're going to do the same thing, but simply start building up the mats. It doesn't matter what block you can use your stairs at this point, you can use a banister, you can use a couch. Anything that's raised off the floor that starts putting more weight on the hands. What's actually happening here is that the higher the block is built, the more weight is being put onto the arms, and therefore they have to be stronger. So this is a progressive step-by-step way to make sure that your body is strong enough to even hold a handstand. From here, you can start seeing the handstand taking shape. Again, the mats are not high enough quite yet. You'd rather that to be 90 degrees, but you can start seeing how that you're going to start kicking the legs up, and the athlete's going to again hit a nice tight position, and even though they're extending the legs upwards, they're not changing what the rest of the body is doing. Some coaches have the athletes put their head in, some out. I find that if the athlete's head is in, then what happens is that they start looking behind them at all the other things going on in the gym or at the competition. This makes it a little bit more difficult to balance. If you're looking between the hands, there's not too much movement there. You just got to focus on one point right in the middle, and it's way easier for balance for most athletes. You can see here now that we are at 90 degrees. We actually can start bringing those toes off the mat. And if we can just teeter back and forth, just playing with the concept of understanding the balance, then you're already doing most of the work. Play with that quite a bit, but then you can go right to the wall. Now, we don't want the wall to be looking like this. We want to turn around the other way so that we're hitting the same position we were on the floor with the stacked mats. For you freestyle kids out there, don't worry so much about perfect shoulder alignment and pointed toes and all that, but the same mechanics do apply even if you're not going to compete. You want to have a nice straight body, and you want to make sure that your butt's not sticking out and your back isn't arching. Here I'm a little bit farther away from the wall because I want to replicate the drill we just did. But then once I get better at it, I'll move into the wall, still keeping my hips off the wall, but I'll just be tapping my toes, trying to see if I can just balance. Again, looking at the green line there is going to help me balance a little bit more rather than looking inwards. You can see that I have a bit of an angle in my shoulders. This is because I have very tight shoulders. A lot of gymnasts, especially the male ones, do have tighter shoulders. That's because there's a lot more strength involved for the male side of the sport rather than the female side. The female side's a little bit more artistic, a little bit more about range of motion. For the men, it's a little bit more about power, and therefore you have to find a happy balance between flexibility but then power muscles. When you start getting good at it, you're going to start walking. What you can't really see here, because it's very hard to describe even in a video because it's such a minute difference, is that I'm actually leaning backwards a little bit, and here I'm leaning forward, and then my hands are catching up. So I kick to handstand, let my heels lean a little bit forward more so than I would on a wall, and then my hands are going to play catch up, and that's what's going to look like I'm moving and walking like this. Athletes, please be careful when you do handstands. Don't just jump into doing a lot of handstand drills all of a sudden. Build up to it from a front support where you just do 5 to 10 minutes a day and build up to doing half an hour. You'll notice that you're going to put a lot of pressure on your wrists and you can have a lot of wrist problems. The wrist extensor muscles go all the way from the fingertips all the way up to the elbow. Some of them are stopping halfway through. We're not going to get into physiology right now, but note that those muscles are the muscles that are actually keeping you balanced. You are contracting those muscles through the fingertips like you do here just to make sure that you can remain balanced. If your hands are out like this, you're going to find it very hard to balance. A lot of athletes do back handspring like that. But what we would do is correct and say, put your hands in. Therefore, you can actually bend the elbows a little bit, get a little bit lower in that back handspring, ready to pop up for a nice high back layout. More about that in our tumbling videos. Now you're going to get into handstand pop. After you've done your full turns, which we will go into more detail on pirouettes in another video, so please come back for that later. But right now we're just going to go to handstand pop, showing that we need to get a bounce off of our hands. You want to think of them almost like legs, where you'd bounce on a trampoline or bounce off a beatboard, where you're going to bounce off your shoulders and your wrists to make sure that you can get up onto the block. This is a very common drill for front handsprings, especially for the younger athletes. Getting the idea of actually pushing off with the shoulders and having a tight alignment enough to be able to actually bounce is really important for a lot of drills. Be careful that the block isn't too high or that it doesn't stick. Make sure that they're either nice flat folding mats like this, or if it's a higher mat, make sure that there's Velcro on the bottom. So keep building it up step by step. Try to do about 20 or 30 each before you start going higher. You really want the muscles to adapt little bit by little bit. I would highly recommend starting on something bouncy and soft, such as the air floor or even a trampoline, but make sure you go nice and low and just get the idea. Then you progress to go onto a rod floor, and then eventually you go onto a regular gymnastics floor. The regular gymnastics floor is much harder, so make sure that you're ready and you've done the sets. When your handstands become really comfortable, your coaches might have you do little drills like this, where you're trying to move around and walk and do an obstacle course. These are definitely very hard because you're not just using the same muscles. Now you have to activate your obliques and other smaller muscles that you may have forgotten about. Because now you're not just walking in a straight line. You now have to turn and step over things, and you gotta be thinking about a lot more stuff. Try to make sure you're not arching as much as I did, but have some fun with it. Thanks, guys.